Welcome to Program Notes, the Band Director Podcast. I'm Dr. John Denis, and this new series we're going to be talking about teaching marching band. I'm going to be chatting with Evan Van Doren, former high school band director at Cedar Park High School, which is just north of Austin. Before we kind of get in and delve into that too much, I've got a couple things I want to throw out there for you. If you're listening to this relatively close to the November-December time that it's released, and you're going to be at Midwest this year, 2018, I'd love to see you. Give me a shout out if you catch me wandering around the floor, or I'll be at the Texas State booth for a little while. Likewise, if you're going to be at TMEA 2019, please shout out to me if you see me around the floor at the Texas State booth, or come to my clinic on recruitment and retention on Friday morning at 10. So in this episode, we're going to be hitting up Evan Van Doren. Like I said, former band director at Cedar Park High School. He's now a full-time arranger, composer, and educational consultant, which he, draws from his experience at the state championship level, nationally recognized marching band level. And we're going to be talking in these episodes about how to successfully teach marching band. And, it's a good way to kind of unpack for next year as it's all still fresh in people's memory. If you're curious about Evan's music and what's going on, I'd encourage you to check him out at vandoren-music.com. That's www.vandoren-music.com. And of course, give us a rating, give us a review, or check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/programnotespodcast.
Well, I really appreciate, one, you just being willing to do this, and two, it really kind of fills a gap for me because it's been a long time since I taught marching band. I have taught marching band, but the last time I did any marching band anything was 2006.
Yeah. From
a teacher standpoint, before I transitioned into junior high. So my first gig was 6 through 12, and so you did everything. Obviously, I was the assistant, but there was a couple of us.
And in marching band, 2006 is kind of ancient history. Things move fast.
Absolutely. Well, and it was just at the start of kind of everybody getting a little more DCI focused. And I was in East Texas, which is way behind the times.
Sure.
Marching band. We were a corps style, but we were one of two corps style shows that showed up at UIL.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me in that area of Texas.
So the marching, the military style was quite strong, and so it was a very different experience teaching marching band there, and in a good way. I mean, I feel like I got a lot of good things out of it, but it is, as you accurately say, ancient history. I'm really glad that you're willing to kind of hop on here, and I mean, for instance, we transitioned to a parking lot. But we had for the start of my time there, we had a practice field, so you couldn't even do dots, as an example.
Oh yeah, sure.
So
right,
definitely there was no tower. Like, you just stood up on a hill and kind of looked down at it, and made the best of the circumstance.
Sure, yeah.
Modern times, how would you go about if you were a new band director? Let's say you get dumped into a situation where you have to teach drill. How would you go about it nowadays?
Well, I mean, as far as the how to teach drill part, I mean, I guess the one thing that is different now that maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago is that, the use of computers and Pieware as a program that, handles your drill is far, far, far more prevalent and accessible. So, as far as teaching drill goes, this is going to sound really obvious, but the first most important thing is that everyone has to have the things that they need to learn drill, which sounds kind of crazy to say out loud. But in order for the group to, lay a solid foundation, every person's got to have their coordinate book or their dot sheet, or however you choose to have the students have their coordinates, and a pencil if you want that. But just making sure that everyone has all of their things, and really for real, making sure of that will be crucial. Because to me, the number one most important thing when you're getting students to learn drill, especially at the very, very beginning of the marching band season, is that all of them have to be able to read a coordinate sheet, and they have to be able to find their own coordinates. Because drill is essentially a collection of people going to predetermined places. And if students don't know where they're going, then, well, they won't know where they're going. So that sounds really obvious, but really taking the time to ensure that the students know how to read the coordinate sheets and are able to find coordinates and then remember them on their own without assistance from section leaders or band directors or field techs. That is a key crucial step in the beginning part of learning drill. So let's back that up for a second. That means you have to teach students how to read a coordinate sheet. So what I typically did was after a few days of learning, the basic marching fundamentals that are necessary to just get around on a football field. What we would do is we would bring the entire marching ensemble inside during summer band, and we'd sit them down for about an hour. And the first half an hour of that was me basically giving a class using a projector about how the field works, how coordinate sheet works, and how to read it and how that all happens. And everybody was in there, freshmen through seniors. It was a good review for the older students, and it was brand spanking new for the younger students. But the way that I presented it, and I always thought this was pretty effective, was relating it to what they already know in their math class. A football field is essentially just a really, really advanced version of a number line or a graph with an X and a Y coordinate. So we would always start out the presentation by showing them a number line and, asking them to how would you find 3 or 2? And I would take questions. I had a little laser pointer, and it was like kind of funny because it was so obvious and simple. I mean, I think I'm no elementary school teacher, but I think you do that in like the second grade or maybe even earlier these days, Lord knows. So we'd start with that. Then we'd go to the X and the Y. So you'd have your, 3, 2. What does that mean? Well, 3 means you go left and right, and 2 means you go up and down, right? So, and then I would show them a blank gridded marching band field and zoom in and show them, look, it's the same thing. There's just a lot of them right next to each other, and they all have kind of different names and play and things on the field so that you know where on the grid you are. So that's sort of the way that we would go about relating it to something they already know, and then having them see that. And then we would practice. I would explain, so here's what the X part of the coordinate is, and we'd look at a coordinate sheet, 3 inside the side 2, 35. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. Let's break that down. We talk about each piece and how it works in the context of this XY axis, and just constantly trying to drill back and forth so they understand this is something that is not as unfamiliar as it may seem. They just have to take the time to go step by step through that process of, here's how I understand each piece of what my coordinate is. Really, it's no different than learning any language. You start by saying the word cat by going at. Not by just reading a full sentence. And this is the same thing, but the numerical drill marching band version of that. So we go through all that. We even, towards the end of that, I would make it fun, and we put up like some drill page that actually had coordinates on it. And I would tell them, I would read out a coordinate that was reflected on that page. And then they would raise their hand and, tell me, that's G6 or that's, clarinet 4 or whatever. And I'd throw candy, and it was a whole thing, whatever. But the point being is that we took the time to teach them how to do it. And then, we always had, I know some people have the students read straight off the coordinate sheets that are printed off Pieware. We had them write it down in dot books. I know these days a lot of people are using Ultimate Drill Book, which I'm a little new to, but from what I can see, it's like amazing. So we would have them though at this point write it down in their dot books to teach them how to do that, and then we'd go outside. And that first day, we would probably take about 30 minutes maybe to learn one page. And then another 30 minutes to learn the next page. And that's a lot longer than you want to take to learn a page of drill. But exercising patience in that moment, such that you provide those younger students who are out in the field learning those coordinates for the very first time, that allows them to process the information that you've given them about reading coordinate sheets, and also affirms the expectation that you expect them to be able to read and know and understand their own coordinate sheets. So it's not like we threw them out there and was like, sink or swim, Right. We gave them the time to process and helped give them the tools to process, and didn't just go out there and say, all right, Timmy, you're in this spot, Susie, you're in that spot. It was all about developing their ability to understand what it is.
Well, and it really touches upon 2 core points that I talk a lot when I teach the undergraduate classes here, which is very exciting. Yeah, the first one being, of course, assume nothing. Right? You don't assume that they
sure.
know how to translate all of that into any kind of meaningful anything. And then the second one is, the real learning. This is a Bob Duke stolen thing, so I got to give credit where credit is due. The real learning shows up in the doing.
Sure.
And so, I love this for listeners out there, like steal this concept of you teach them how to do it, then you make them do it. That's how they learn.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I think what is challenging is that, as marching band directors, it's go, 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 go. And you're just trying to move fast and get everyone to do the thing they're supposed to do. And it seems like it should be obvious that, Timmy should be in that hole right there where there's an obvious hole, but it's not obvious to Timmy. So as a band director, you have to know that by slowing down now, it's going to allow you to achieve at a higher level and move faster later. Once we get past those first day or two or three, after that, it's 5 to 10 minutes a page, maybe faster if it's something that is straightforward and simple. And because we've taken the time to teach the language of drill, now everyone knows the language of drill and everything goes faster, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, completely. You're laying fundamental groundwork for later on, essentially.
Sure. So now, assuming they know how to read the drill, the next thing that I would want to share with someone who has to do this for the first time would be to really solidify what the process is for learning drill. Marching band success, especially in the first, at least 2/3 of your season, if not longer, is all about systems and processes across the entire thing. Music, visual, everything you do is going to be based on some system or process that's repeated enough times and is simple enough to where the students can do it successfully 10 out of 10 times, and every student is capable of doing it. So being consistent with a process is crucial to their success. So I'll just share the process that I used when I was teaching drill, and this was something that developed every year. I think it was a little bit different. So I don't know that there's necessarily a right or wrong way to teach drill, but I do know that having a process to do it and keeping that process the same will increase the success and the retention of the student. Mm-hmm. So what we would do first, kind of like I was just talking about when you're learning coordinates for the first time, is you tell the students to go find whatever page you're supposed to be in. So let's say page 4 as an example. You're learning page 4, and that's the next page you're learning. First thing you do is have the students open up their coordinate sheet or their drill book or ultimate drill book, read that coordinate, and go stand in that spot. And this is where the kid gets to go find it on their own. Hopefully it happens quickly rather than slowly as your season goes on, but they find it on their own. And you, as a director, are comparing what you see on the field to what you have in the sheet in front of you and ensuring that everyone has found where they're supposed to be and making any corrections or adjustments that are needed, so that you have that spot. Everyone finds that spot. From there, it becomes all about teaching them how to go from the previous set to that set. So the process of doing that, well, first of all, here's a really big thing. I think a lot of people have their students when they go find a drill set for the first time, they have chalk with them or chips or something like that, poker chips, and they have them mark the spot on the ground or on the field or on the parking lot where the student is supposed to be so that they can set it up perfectly the next time. Well, all you've done, in my opinion, when you give the student that crutch is you've allowed them now to stop thinking about where they're supposed to be in the field, and now they're just looking for the little V with their coordinate in between, the little chalk mark on the ground. And the reality is that chalk mark ain't going to be there when you're on the turf. So again, it's another thing that initially it could slow you down as a teacher. But long term, you're asking the students to remember the important things about what they're doing in their performance, such that is committed to memory and muscle memory, and hopefully then they do that rather than not know where they're going when their chalk isn't there anymore. So that is all to say, I wouldn't have them marking on the ground really in any way, except on some extenuating circumstances. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But once they're set up and they know where they are, then I would reset them to the previous page, whatever. So page 3 in this example. I would have them point to page 4, and I would even say it the same way. I would say, please point to page 4. And the students were trained that when I would say that, they would respond with the number of counts that drill set is. So let's just say it's 8 counts. I would say, please point to page 4. And all the students would shoot their right arm out in a straight line with their index finger, and they would point at exactly where they're going, and they would say out loud, 8, or 8 counts or something like that. Then I would have them draw the pathway those 8 counts should be on, and most drill is going to be a straight line path with even step size. So we break that down before we march the drill. I skipped this step. I also have them face their next coordinate, even if it's backfield or whatever, just again to take one layer away from it so we can kind of scaffold the skills up here. So they point at the dot, they say the number of counts, they draw the pathway so they see the straight line path, which is going to be different than their neighbors probably. And then I have them calculate their step size by cutting the distance in half. So they point halfway, and that's 4 counts. And I kind of talk them through this as they do it. I have them cut that in half, that's 2 counts. I have them cut that in half, that's 1 count. And then I have them practice whatever that size of step is that they just calculated. They do it a couple times in a row, get a sense of this is a big step, this is a small step, and then I simply have them march those 8 counts facing the dot. And we do that. They go to page 4. We check and adjust, make sure they know, to try to get them to understand, did I go too big? Did I go too small? Did I go too far left, right, whatever it was. And then, just to save time, we get on the set. I have them turn and face their previous set and march back 8 counts together to page 3. So marching the set in reverse. You can do that with most drill. And instead of having them run it back and reset, now you've duplicated the number of reps that you get on that step size and pathway. And then you do that back and forth to give the students an opportunity to better understand what is my step size and pathway. How do I need to adjust it so that I can take a perfectly straight line path? I can take 8 perfectly even sized steps, and it makes me land, boom, with my ankle bone on the dot at the very end. Does that all make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about the reps is such a great tip because, I feel like sometimes young teachers get, particularly when I see people working, young marching band directors, they get afraid of reps instead of just embracing, hey, how many times can we do this? Correct repetitions, of course. If you're practicing it poorly, that doesn't count. But how many times can we do this well so that way when the students are nervous or they're distracted, they're still going to do it well?
Yeah, there seems to be this philosophical difference, I think, and not just in marching band, but in teaching in general. That is, there's the one side of like, I just need to get them to do it a lot. And as long as they're trying their best and I'm giving them information, they'll get there eventually, even if it's really bad at the beginning. And then there's the other philosophy that seems like the polar opposite, where it's I need to get them to do one small piece exactly right before I layer on the next piece or the next piece. Mm-hmm. Because if I have them do it and it's not perfect, now I'm teaching them bad habits, right? So, and I always felt, and sometimes still feel, the tug and pull between those two sides, because I think in some ways they're both right. But as it relates specifically to marching band, there's so much going on, and the student is expected to do so much at one time that at some point you just have to give them chances to try to do it and keep on giving them information. So for me as a marching band director, I think I swung more towards the first example, where I was focused on more reps, give information, try to make it better. But I certainly wasn't waiting until it was perfect to go on. Because I feel like if that was what I did, I would have never gone on.
No, absolutely.
It was kind of one of those. So, anyways, I feel like that's something that people have to deal with. That's how I would encourage people to think about that. But I do want to just affirm really, really important a couple of things. The whole idea of straight line path and even step size, that is everything. That is what makes drill clean. And in most cases, step sizes will be even and pathways will be straight. You'll have exceptions and a few places in your show probably. But in these cases, just like we expect the student to understand their coordinate and be able to read the coordinate sheet and know where they are in the field and where they're supposed to go, in the same way, the student has to assess the step size and pathway and make conscious adjustments as they're learning, because they won't get it right away. One of the things that I really encourage students to do when they're learning drill for the first time is, no matter what, during that set, when you're facing the pathway, and even when you're not, take a straight line path and an even step size, even if it takes you 6 steps away from your dot, and then adjust in the end. And then the next time you do it, don't do that same thing. Make some adjustment. But again, take a straight line path and an even step size. And as long as you get a little closer every time, you'll start to learn what that feels like. And then you can repeat what it feels like when it's correct. I think where we get in trouble is a lot of kids, they're trying to please or trying to do a good job. They start towards their dot. They realize they're not going to be anywhere close.
And they adjust. Yeah.
And then they make adjustments, which, when you get to mid-October, that's exactly what you want them to do. But right now, we're trying to get them to figure out what it feels like to take a straight line path and an even step size to the dot. So the students need to be encouraged and emboldened and told that it's okay to not make it to their dot. Here's what is the priority: straight line path and even step size. And then just try to get a little closer every time and congratulate them when they do get closer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we live, and our kids really live in a failure averse world. So they live in a world that's putting a lot of pressure on them to not ever make any mistakes. And so when they see that, when they do that, oftentimes I think the thing that drives that dramatic adjustment early on is this idea of, oh my gosh, I've realized I'm wrong.
Right.
Instead of just being able to learn from it, to have it, and then to continue on and to move to make an adjustment the next time, but just to move forward with it. And I think that's up to band directors to create that environment and to set that expectation that you're describing there of take an even step size, and then we'll go back and do it again.
Absolutely. Well, and then shifting over to the playing side, I totally stole this from Matt Harloff, who I learned under at the Carolina Crown and at Avon High School. I tech there when I was in college in Indiana. But something that I stole, and I probably said this thing more than any other thing in my teaching life, is I always taught the students that the worst thing in marching band that they could do of anything is not play. It's the worst thing. And I would say, what's the worst thing you can do? And the sort of the field would scream back at me, not play. And it would be like, at least 60 times a day in the month of August, I would be saying that because it's such an awkward thing to play an instrument and move for the first time. And the natural inclination when you feel uncomfortable is to figure out a way to get comfortable again. And most students will do that by not playing. Well, what happens then? Well, now they have learned that it's, number one, okay to not play. And number two, now less than half of your band is playing. And that's the thing that makes you sound good, is when more people play. So it was sort of on that same line of, creating a environment that is not risk averse for your students. I was almost like a meditative chant that I would get them to do. And I was really, kind of blatant about it. I was like, I do not care if the sound coming out of your instrument doesn't even sound like your instrument right now. I don't even care if you're trying to play this opener and it sounds like an animal has died and it's coming out of, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you play. The worst thing you can do is not play. And I know some of this, I've been fortunate this fall to go and travel to a variety of different schools at a variety of different levels. And it was surprising far on in the season with all kinds of groups, really successful ones that are less competitively successful, that the students still had this fear, even in the month of October, of I feel like it's better for me to not play because I think I'm going to sound bad. No, play. Everyone's got to play. Nothing is going to make the band sound better than just everyone playing all the time. And then you move forward from there. So I think that's the best example of trying to create an environment that is not risk averse.
Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't feel bad. It takes consistency and over the topness because you're working against not just the band culture, but the school culture in general in that. They get told, well, we're going to do our 7 practice benchmarks for our state mandated test so that we can continue to get funding so that we can continue to, function. It's still bad. It was really bad because I was, teaching when a lot of the No Child Left Behind stuff hit.
Right.
And they're getting it from all different angles. So, band directors out there, don't be discouraged and don't back off of it. If you're going to do this, jump in and sell it and believe it and live it, and be big about it. And I love the chant fixed response thing. They get them where they really understand it. And then my guess is when they sounded bad in August and played, you weren't going, oh my gosh, that's terrible, guys. Why do you sound like that?
Correct. Yeah, you're celebrating the fact that they're playing. Totally. and even so, like sometimes, you have that moment where you're asking the kids to play something, or there's a rest and then they play. And then what invariably happens, the baritone player comes in 7,000 counts early, right? That's happened to all of us. And probably we've both been that person that's coming early. So especially in the month of August and early September, if that happens, especially if it's a younger student, which it often is, they come in guns a-blazing. The band's supposed to play forte. They come in and they play forte. And, it may not sound amazing, but it maybe doesn't sound awful, and they have taken a breath and they've come in and it just happened to be a handful of counts too early. I'm going over and I'm giving that kid a high five. I might even do a little chest bump, depending. But I'm making a big deal out of that kid not being afraid to breathe and play. I'm taking the opportunity to really shower that kid with praise and show everybody it is good, it is okay. I'm so glad that you came in like that. Now just count a little bit better before you come in.
Right.
And then you move on. You know what I mean? And that will help create that environment that is less risk averse and gets the kids to more want to take chances. So.
Well, this has been Program Notes, the Band Director Podcast. I am Dr. John Denis, and I hope this episode has been helpful and meaningful to you. If you're interested in some graduate work and you're looking for either a full-time program or a summers-only program with some pretty awesome housing deals, we would love to have you here at Texas State. I'd love to have a chance for you to come and delve into some of our graduate work. We're doing some research stuff this summer and also some advanced rehearsal techniques in our graduate courses, which is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to that. So give us a shout out and give me an email at john.dennis@txstate.edu if you have any questions about that or any questions you'd like to be featured on another future Q&A episode of the podcast. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.